Good evening, everybody. May I offer you a blessing to all of those of you who come here practicing the Dharma. This is the second formal talk of the week. In the first talk, I gave you an outline of the practice of Anapanasati. To recap on the practice of Anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, it's a meditation technique for calming the mind, for finding peace of mind through establishing or fixing mindfulness on the breathing, on the in and out breaths. As we practice mindfulness of the breathing, mindfulness with the breathing, it's common that one starts to proliferate, starts to think, get caught into thinking or doubting, and gets caught into doubt, uncertainty about the practice. When this happens, Ajahn Chah used to say to just contemplate the impermanence of these thoughts and doubts. They're not sure, they're not certain. Or sometimes in the course of the meditation, the mind is very, very agitated, thinking a lot or very confused. Then he suggested to try taking in 3 very deep breaths, fill the lungs up to the full capacity, so there's no room for any more air, and then let all that air out. Do that 3 times just to re-establish mindfulness. Having done that, taken in the 3 deep breaths, let them out, re-establish awareness on the breathing, and simply know the breathing as you breathe in and out. There should be the knowing. There's no need to try and force the breath or do anything unnatural with it. Just let it flow naturally at its own pace. As you continue to practice mindfulness with breathing, different thoughts will come up in the mind, and you'll probably find that you could be partially aware of the breathing and partially aware of the thoughts, but although you might not be able to completely stop thinking, you still have a certain level of calm as some of your mindfulness is with the breathing, so don't worry about it when thoughts come up. As the mind starts to calm down like this, and you have a certain level of mindfulness, but there are still thoughts coming up, it's rather like a chicken in its coop. The chicken moves around, but it's got its limits, the edge of the chicken coop. It's the same with your mindfulness. The thoughts come up, but because there is already a certain level of mindfulness, they don't go too far. The mind doesn't wander too far. If the mind is calm like this, then both the body and the mind will start to feel light and at ease, relaxed. And this makes it, puts the mind in a state that's ready for work or ready to contemplate. Then you can start to contemplate this body. Start to contemplate it in terms of the 3 characteristics, to see it as impermanent, as unsatisfactory, and as not self. This is what gives rise to insight. This is vipassana meditation, which uses the 3 characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, as its object. But if the mind is still too agitated, too confused, then to clearly see these 3 characteristics, to practice vipassana and gain clear insight will be difficult or impossible, rather like a knife that's still blunt, not sharp enough to cut through things. In Buddhism, we talk about 3 kinds or 3 levels of wisdom. There's the wisdom or knowledge that comes through learning from hearing talks or studying books. Second slightly deeper or more profound level is that which comes through one's own contemplation of what one's heard, what one's studied, but contemplating it within one's own mind through the thinking process. But the highest kind of wisdom, the wisdom which one is seeking for in Buddhism, is that wisdom or insight which comes through vipassana, through the quiet mind, contemplating things very clearly, seeing very clearly. The kind of insight or wisdom that arises from the peaceful mind is like, say, when the mind is peaceful, perhaps you reflect on leaves that fall off the trees when they die. When they fall from the trees at first, they're freshly coloured, fresh green coloured, but as they lose their moisture, dry up, they crinkle, become dark brown, golden, yellow colour. Just a simple reflection like that with a peaceful mind can give rise to a deep sense of dispassion as one sees the impermanence of all conditioned things. So the practice of meditation to calm the mind as a basis for insight is very important, and it's very good that you're coming to here to practice like this, practice meditation, learning to calm your mind. This is the best way to develop mindfulness and wisdom. It's quite natural that sometimes you'll feel more peaceful, other times you'll feel not very peaceful at all. Don't worry about that, just keep trying to do the practice. Sometimes you might be very diligent and practice meditation every day for 7 days or 10 days, but then stop for another 7 days, 10 days or a period of time. If you do it like that, it'll be difficult to get firm results or good results. If you try and maintain a more continuity with your practice, do it regularly and contemplate the breath, practice mindfulness of breathing, and just contemplate the impermanence of the body, the impermanence of the breath as the breath goes in and out. If one sees that often, sees it clearly, this is what will give rise to true insight and understanding. Or you could contemplate the 4 elements, the 4 physical elements. Divide the body up into the 4 elements, the earth element, heat element, water element and air element. See how these elements come together temporarily and then separate again. The physical body, the physical form that we have here, it's not here all the time in this way. It's always changing, constantly changing, and eventually the body will die, degenerate, break up. One can contemplate this, and this is what will give rise to insight, to wisdom. Or again, to contemplate the forms, the images that we see with the eyes, the sounds that we hear, the tastes that we taste, the smells we receive, the physical sensations we receive with the body, or the thoughts and ideas that come up in the mind. Again, to contemplate them, see the way they arise and pass away, their unsatisfactory nature, the fact that the lack of self in these things. Again, this will give rise to wisdom, to insight. Whatever object the mind receives, if one has mindfulness and sampajanya, or clear comprehension, or all-round knowing, this is what will give rise to wisdom. As one's mind receives whatever the object is with mindfulness and clear comprehension, then the 3 characteristics will be perceived. It will be seen as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and as not self. And this will give rise to a separation. The mind will separate off from whatever that object is, or it will detach from that object, and that's what will give rise to peace of mind. If you're contemplating the mind and its mood, This we call Anapanasati as one of the 4 satipatthanas, one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Whenever a mood takes hold of the mind, when the mind is greedy or desires something, or if there is aversion, or if there's some form of delusion, one can contemplate this mood, see it as it arises, establishes itself and passes away. And seeing the arising and passing away of the mood, one will detach from it. But if the mind is not yet calm or peaceful with samadhi, then that act of trying to see the mood, the object, in terms of the 3 characteristics will be something that one won't clearly see it. It'll be sanya, or just memory. Panya, or insight, is something different. One sees the 3 characteristics very profoundly, and it affects the mind, makes the mind, one sees very clearly, and the mind becomes peaceful from this. You have to try and give rise to insight as often as possible. To practice meditation, develop as much insight as possible, particularly contemplate the body, see the body very clearly in terms of the 3 characteristics. In practicing meditation, Ajahn Chah often used to advise that you don't have to analyze a lot or think about things a lot, work things out a lot. Just simply bring up these 3 simple reflections of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self. Whatever it is that's coming up in the mind, just use these simple reflections, and the mind can accept that, can believe those 3 things, and that this can bring peace to the mind. So mindfulness is a very important foundation of the practice. Whatever your posture, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, try to maintain mindfulness at all times. As mindfulness becomes more continuous, it's like drops of water running together to form one flow of water, say like drops of water from a tap becoming a stream of water. As you use sati or mindfulness to watch over the mind, you watch out to see whether the mind is getting caught into liking or attraction, and disliking or aversion. Whenever it does get caught into liking or disliking, then you become aware of that, make it known to yourself. If mindfulness and clear comprehension are working together, and insight into the 3 characteristics comes about, then the mind will not attach to moods, won't attach to objects. If it's not caught into liking and disliking, it's in a neutral or balanced state. This is Majjhima Patipatta, or the middle way. And this is the beginning of the path, the noble path. As we're sitting practicing here, all the factors of the Eightfold Noble Path are coming together within each of us: Sila, Samadhi and Panya. As we're practicing, even with the intention to practice, beginning with the intent. In the beginning we have the intention to practice, and we keep the 5 precepts. This is the very beginning of the practice. Keeping the 5 precepts means to compose one's body and speech, and the mind sees the danger or the harm that comes from when one breaks the precepts. If one is keeping the 5 precepts like this, then the mind becomes beautiful in the Dhamma. One becomes the Kalyanachon, or one who is beautiful practicing in the Dhamma. Anyone who is practicing without sila is like someone stuck in the mud. They're not able to really experience the light and brightness that comes through insight. If you try to practice meditation without taking sila into consideration or without keeping the precepts, it's very difficult for any true calm or insight to arise. If one has established one's practice beginning with the sila, with 5 precepts, then calm and insight will arise in its own time, but one has to depend on endurance, patience and endurance as well. The purpose of keeping the precepts is to provide a foundation of, or an initial level of calm for the mind. Once one is established in the sila, then one can practice meditation, but one has to have a certain confidence or faith in the meditation method or meditation object that one is using. Contemplating in the body, one part of the body, or sweeping through the body, parts of the body, or focusing on just one part of the body until the mind becomes firm, calm and firm, that both these methods can give rise to samadhi. Even listening to a Dhamma talk like this, one can make into a practice of samadhi to calm the mind. Ever since the time of the Buddha, Buddhist lay followers have gone to listen to talks, and sometimes in the time of the Buddha, listening to talks very intently with samadhi, with a calm mind, they might actually gain deep insight and realize the Dhamma during the middle of the talk. It's similar to a swamp. If a swamp has a lot of algae or weeds on the top of it, covering over the swamp, the water of the swamp, if you throw a rock into the water, all the weeds and the algae will part, and you'll see the water will clear for a while. Listening to a Dhamma talk is the same. One gets an injection or a burst of wisdom which will give rise to a little bit of light into one's mind, and will give some guidance as to the way to practice in Buddhism. When you listen to a talk, it's important to try and calm the mind so that you can receive anything that comes from the talk. You can practice mindfulness of breathing as you listen. This makes the listening to a talk into a practice. Sometimes even during the course of a talk, you might become very peaceful and no longer actually listen to the words of the talk, but the mind becomes very peaceful and stable in its own meditation. So I encourage everybody to keep putting effort into the practice. Try to set aside all your doubts and uncertainty about it. And if you do have doubts and uncertainty plaguing the mind, then to just keep teaching the mind, as Ajahn Chah said, just keep seeing the impermanence of all your different thoughts and proliferations. Just keep teaching the mind, and sooner or later it will calm down. So you could conclude and say there are 2 main aspects or ways to practice. One is to contemplate the body in terms of the 3 characteristics, to reflect upon it. The other is to just fix your attention on one aspect of the body, one part of the body, without thinking at all. Just concentrate very firmly on that part of the body. Both of these methods are ways to meditate, contemplate, to give rise to peace of mind, calm of mind. And they're both appropriate for people who like to think a lot, practitioners who have a lot of thoughts coming up in the course of practice. If any practitioner doesn't like to contemplate the 3 characteristics, contemplate the body, then to just fix attention on the breath and practice mindfulness of breathing, as I explained earlier. Ajahn Chah used to compare the practice to a knife. There's both the ridge, the flat ridge behind on the top part of the knife, and then there's the sharp edge. There's both samadhi and there's both insight, or calm and insight. Samadhi and panya are involved in practice. These two aspects work together. He taught his disciples that when they learnt to calm their mind, then to contemplate the body and see it very clearly in the light of the three characteristics. But he didn't actually give specific teachings to each individual. He would teach generally in this way, and then leave it up to each individual to find his own way in the practice. As you contemplate the body, just try to find what aspect of that contemplation, what aspect of the body might bring calm to the mind, and then work with that. Keep working with it until you calm the mind. Some practitioners they might have a strong defilement coming up, extreme lust, desire, or extreme aversion, anger, contemplating death, Anapanasati, might work for them. These different techniques or aspects of the meditation, one has to try them out for oneself, like food. To know which food you like, which food you find delicious, you have to try different foods out for yourself so that you know what the tastes are like. As you practice, if you do get in any peace of mind, or get into some, develop some real calm of mind, that's enough. Just have a peaceful mind and use it to contemplate. You don't have to start doubting what level of samadhi have I gained. Is this jhana? What is this? You don't have to do that. It's like a lot of different kinds of fruit in a basket. You don't have to know the names, the conventional names of all these different kinds of fruit. But if you tried one, you know what it tastes like. That's enough. You know what it's like. Ajahn Chah taught to practice letting go, so to try not to attach to goals, specific goals in the practice, that I must get this level of insight or that level of samadhi, but try to let go of any kind of attachment to these stages or levels of the practice. If you do tend to attach to these, then this will actually increase the amount of confusion and agitation in the mind. It will make you less peaceful. He used to talk about this older monk who came and ordained with him at Wat Pah Pong. He had a lot of faith, and he was really keen to get quick results in the practice and get the highest results. So from the very word go, he was walking and sitting, doing a lot of meditation, putting a lot of effort in. But in a short space of time, he didn't get the results he wanted, so he got very quickly, he lost his inspiration, got depressed and disrobed. But if you practice with this sense of letting go and find a balanced way to practice, then it's much easier, and you just keep going in a more natural way. Practicing with letting go means to try and keep on a central path, not getting caught in liking and disliking. Like you're walking along a straight path, and whatever you meet along that path, whether it's branches or stones or things blocking your way, as you meet each obstacle, just to pick it out and then carry along the path. And if you meet another obstacle, just to pick it up, move it off the path. For whatever object, sense object or mood the mind experiences, just contemplate it and see if the mind is getting caught into attraction or aversion. See whether the mind is caught into suffering or happiness or unhappiness, and then just to pull back to a place of neutrality in the middle. This is the way for the mind to progress, to move forward in the practice. Even as in the lay life you have jobs, families, things to do, you can, if you practice in this way, you can practice in the lay life. Because to incorporate the Dharma into your life is as important as to have breath for the physical body. If you reflect on it, the Dharma means nature, or that which is natural. If you think about it, when we all started off in life, we were just a small little blob of elements in our mother's stomach, in her womb. As that small little blob gradually grew, taking in more food substances and moisture and nutriment, mixing the elements, the four elements mixing together, and the body grew, then a sense of attachment formed for that body. We started to take it as an us, as a me, as an I. What that means is that attaching to that form, it means that we have to live with old age, sickness and death as well, but we never see that. You see that what gets old, dies, is actually just these four elements. If you were to contemplate the simple truth of it, to sit meditation, make the mind calm and just contemplate this simple truth every day, little by little, then you'll see very profoundly the truth that the Buddha was teaching about impermanence, the impermanence of the body and mind. If you're able to see this clearly in your mind just once in your whole life, then you could say that you're somebody who's been born with wisdom. Seeing clearly, seeing this truth clearly, contemplating the body clearly, to let go of attachment for the body. Once you view this form in the correct way, once you let go of your attachment, then you let go of what they call sakkaya ditthi, or personality view. I think that this body, this form, is not me, it's not I, it's something that is not self. And that would lead to an end to any kind of doubt or uncertainty about the Buddha Dhamma Sangha as well. You'd let go of Sila Paramata, or attachment to wrong ways of practice which don't lead to seeing the Dhamma. The mind that sees like this, has insight like this, is a mind that is wholesome, but there is no one there who is the owner of the mind. There's no sense of self involved. The Buddha Dhamma Sangha will come into that mind. So to come and practice Dharma here is perhaps the most useful thing you can do with your time, maybe. So I encourage you all to be diligent and keep practicing as regularly and as consistently as you can, and you should all get some good results from it. So I think I've given enough time, talked enough for the moment. After this, we can have a discussion if anybody's interested. Anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Let's go back to the one where you spoke about your focus on the breath, Anapanasati. At the point at which breath becomes imperceptible, your mind is in a state of silence, breath is so shallow, the body is unable to perceive that breath by its perception. In short, Vedana is totally non-existent in terms of perception. The perception cannot perceive that element of Vedana that could be arising out of your breath. Now, at this moment, the mind is in a state of silence, and often the only thought that resides in the mind is the thought that I have no thought. Now, at this moment, is there a flux between sensation, perception, and thought? or is it a state of pure Chittanupassana?
What do you mean by flux?
Flux means movement between Vedana to Sanya and Sanya to Vijnana and backwards.
I'm not sure, to translate the question, I'm not sure I understand what flux means.
The flux means movement between Vedana, Sanya and Vijnana and Chitta.
Movement. Could you just repeat the second part again? Could you just repeat the second part of the question? It's quite a detailed question. I want to get it right.
I was wanting to draw the attention of the Venerable was the fact that at the point at which perception ceases, in the sense that we cannot perceive the breath any longer, Sanya ceases in short, and at that moment the mind is in a state of silence, and in that state of silence the only thought that resides in your mind is that I have no thought. So what I wanted to know was, is that a state of pure Chittanupassana, or is there a movement between Vedana, Sanya and the Chitta at that point?
If one practices Anapanasati to that level, very refined level, where one is no longer experiencing external sense objects, one is experiencing an internal object, there is still a Vedana that arises from the internal, from the within the mind, either Sukha Vedana or Upekkha Vedana.
Following on that, what is the state of perception? In fact, I probably will say it in Pali far better than in English. Neda Sanya and Na Sanya. Now, is that at that point there is an arising and ceasing of Sanya, or that Sanya is not present at all?
If one develops the Rupa jhanas to the most refined level, then the mind is experiencing Upekkha Vedana. And if one if the mind detaches from that and reflects on it, one can see the impermanence, unsatisfactory and lack of self in that Vedana, and the mind will separate from the Vedana. If one takes one's meditation further from the Rupa jhanas and takes a more refined object, just Nama Dhamma as opposed to Rupa Dhamma, and keeps focusing on Nama Dhamma, at that level of Neva Sanya Na Sanya, one is not attached, one is simply aware of that there is no Sanya, and is also one's aware of that there is Sanya, but one isn't attached to either. One isn't attached to the fact that there is the period when there is no Sanya, and one isn't attached to the, I'm not sure if this is a correct translation. Practicing at this level, one doesn't attach to the sense, one doesn't attach to perception, one doesn't attach to the lack of perception. One is, let's say, in a space of emptiness or place in the middle where one is neither attached to the Sanya or the lack of Sanya. Not understand anything or have any questions? Do you all know how to make your minds peaceful? Michael?
Could Ajahn comment on the difference between Vedana, feeling it, and sensation in terms of contemplating feeling and contemplating sensation?
Sensation, what do you mean by?
Well, sensation is like sometimes seem to be feeling, and yet in the other sutras feeling is spoken of as pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling. So is there a difference between these contemplations? And the sensation is a feeling that arises on the body, and I'm using a feeling in the sense of often meaning more often in English rather than
You mood, feeling the way you feel good, feel bad.
cold, sort of
Our body sensations. As far as body sense, the physical body goes, Vedana arises when the body contacts things. It's just Sukha Vedana or Dukkha Vedana. The mind is a little bit more refined. The mind can experience both Sukha Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, and also Upekkha Vedana. But the contemplation of the Vedana, whether you're experiencing it as physical sensations attaching coming to the body that one experiences through the body, or different objects which give rise to Vedana which the mind experiences, the contemplation is just the same. Contemplate in light of the three characteristics, see them as impermanent, rising, passing away, unsatisfactory and not self. Did you understand?
In terms of, say, the difference between Kaya Nupassana and Vedana Nupassana, is it the contemplation upon the characteristics of the Vedana that really makes it Vedana Nupassana, rather than the observing of those characteristics in the body?
Kaya Nupassana, body contemplation of the body, and as a first foundation of mindfulness, involves, for example, contemplating the in and out breath. This is one aspect of the body. Focusing or establishing mindfulness on the in and out breath, or establishing mindfulness on one of the 32 parts of the body, or establishing mindfulness on your posture as you're moving, as you turn left, turn right, or as you're stretching, sitting down, standing, walking, whatever, and simply maintaining mindfulness consistently on one of those aspects of the body. Contemplation of Vedana Nupassana, the second foundation of mindfulness. Vedana is related to the body, but the contemplation is slightly different, that you're not contemplating on the body itself, but on the feeling that arises, say, from contact, different parts of the body. You're contemplating the arising and passing away of feeling, because it's something that's impermanent, the unsatisfactory nature of feeling. It's not something to be attached to, because it's impermanent. It's not something that's you, there's not a self. If one keeps watching it very carefully, one sees that there's not a self in that Vedana. And wherever it arises, in whatever way, these three characteristics are always applicable, and one just keeps watching the Vedana in light of these three characteristics. So although they're closely related, they're quite different, the practices.
Would it be right to say, sir, that Anapanasati is the contemplation of the anatomical composition of the body, Nama Rupa, as compared to Vedana, which is a functioning of its six senses, the eye, nose, taste, ear, and touch, and the mind. So that makes the distinct, perhaps the difference, that one is anatomical, whereas the other one is a functioning.
Say if you have a headache, say if you're ill, you have a headache, then the headache, it comes from the body, but one contemplates the Vedana, the feeling of the headache, the feeling of pain. If one, say, is sitting meditation and pain arises, if one doesn't contemplate, one immediately takes the pain, one sees the pain as in terms of a sense of self, which says I have pain in the leg or whatever. But if one contemplates, then there is knowing of pain, and one sees that the pain is not self. There is no one who is painful, but it's just Vedana. One sees it as Vedana. There is a separation.
When the Buddha said contemplation of the sensation object internally, or contemplate the object externally, contemplate the object externally and externally, what does the Buddha mean?
For object, what would you give as an example, say?
The body.
Alright. Contemplating the body in the body, for example, means contemplating your own body. Contemplating the body externally means the body of others. Contemplating the body that is both internal and external, you could say, is like contemplating the external part of your own body is one aspect of that. Contemplating the internal organs, that which is inside your body, as part of that. As you contemplate the body inside the body, then you might, if the mind becomes very refined, if mindfulness becomes very refined and contemplation is very consistent and staying within the body, very firmly within the body, then it might arise that you might see the body in terms of the four elements. You might see the body in terms of a flow, as a flow of air, or see the body as a flow of water in some way. As you contemplate like this, this is something that the mind will just become more and more refined. It'll see the four elements in more and more refined ways. Does that answer your question?
Many teachers have been trying to explain that I still trying to understand.
To just try and work it out through the words of the sutta, say the Satipatthana Sutta, it's quite difficult. The thing to do is to get down to the body contemplation and do it. If you contemplate the externals of your body, then the body, say the external body, got the hair of the head, skin, nails and so on. You can go through the parts of the body on the outside. The internal parts of the body go through the organs, the blood, the bones, whatever. The idea is to see one or more aspects of the body as clear as possible with your mind's eye. See very clearly in light of the three characteristics. When you see very clearly in light of the three characteristics, then it should give rise to a sense of detachment, dispassion. That should give rise to a lessening and ultimately a complete fading away of greed, hatred and delusion. That's the aim of the practice. The more you practice it, actually do the practice, then if you go back and read the words of the sutta, they will start to become more clear to you. Oh, sorry. Sorry, there was a lady who was going to... lady at the back. If you contemplate, say for instance, the hair of the head, one single hair of the head, on one level you can contemplate the hair on the head and it's changing all the time, and then one day that hair will loosen from the head, it will separate from your body, it will go back to the earth, so to speak. That hair of the head will change into earth. Say if you were to take a hair out, put it on the earth, it would gradually become earth. That's contemplating it on one level. If you contemplate a bit deeper, then maybe you see that as it changes into earth, then that earth itself is a mass of molecules and atoms. So if you like separate all those molecules and atoms out, then what's left? There's nothing left, or emptiness is left. So then you see the emptiness in the hair, each hair. And if you contemplate this very often and see it very clearly, then you're seeing emptiness the whole time. You see the emptiness or the lack of self. When I say emptiness, I mean lack of self. That's an example. Yeah?
How often do you do this contemplation? During the meditation or during daily life? And how do you progress from one level to the other?
Say an important measuring stick in the practice like this is that to see how peaceful the mind is. If the mind is peaceful, then one can contemplate like this. But if one loses one's peace of mind, loses one's calm, loses one's samadhi, then the mind will get caught into proliferation and just aimless thinking, and one will obviously not be able to contemplate like that. So one has to keep looking at one's own mind, keep putting the inputs, training the mind in calm, and then developing insight. And if one's practice of insight degenerates into proliferation, then one has to go back and develop some more calm, and one just has to keep working at it like that. And each individual is different. It's something that develops naturally for each individual. And the inner wisdom or insight that develops, say, from one level to another level, this is something that happens naturally, that one can't really it's not something you have to control or think much about. It will take place by itself. One just keeps doing the practice. Yeah?
If there is no permanent, inherently existing I, could you explain what it is that would go from lifetime to lifetime?
This is a matter of what they call Vata samsara, or samsara, which is like the endless round of birth and death, cycle of existence. What feeds that is kilesa, or defilements, karma, which is like intentional action, and then vibhaka karma, which is the fruit of that intentional action. And this is say like a chain or something that these three things feed each other. If one still has a defiled mind, still has defilements, then those defilements will lead you to make karma, either good or bad karma. When you make karma, then there has to be a result from that karma, resulting karma. That's vibhaka karma, and that leads you to attach to another realm of more realms of existence. In other words, leads to a process of what we call birth and death. And as long as one has defilements, that process just keeps going on and on. And the mind just keeps attaching, even to good karma. If one still attaches to that, then it creates more vibhaka karma, resultant karma, and creates more birth and death, and it just keeps going. Is that okay?
What it is that holds that process for an individual. Like some people have a concept of a soul.
you could say as long as this process is taking place, birth and death, kilesa karma, vibhaka karma, then there's always a self that's arising within that process, so that it seems like there's some kind of soul or entity there, because there's a sense of self constantly arising. What the thing to do is to practice. What one does is say is one's moving from the lowest to the highest. One maybe sees the harm of making bad karma, so one starts to stop making bad karma and starts making more and more good karma. And making good karma, the best karma one can do is to practice meditation, to develop insight into this whole process, develop wisdom. And as one's making good karma, one's still attaching to that good karma. There's still a sense of self, some kind of ego attaching to the good karma one is doing, but at the same time that sense of attachment is much more refined than, say, the sense of self that might be arising for somebody making a lot of bad karma. And it's a matter of, as one keeps practicing, the sense of self is getting more subtle, more refined, less coarse, and one just keeps letting go, until eventually the wisdom that's arising, the insight that's arising from practice, is so powerful that the sense of self is constantly disintegrating. One's constantly having insight into the very lack of self in the whole thing, and that is what leads to the end of the process.